Hey, I'm Allison from Learning at the Primary Pond, and this is my second time trying to do this video. This is how much I am determined to bring it to you. So if you were on the other video previously, thanks for coming on back over. If you weren't, hi, glad you're here. We are here to chat about how to structure like an extra help session or an intervention lesson for students. I say K2 because that's what I focus on, but I've used these principles actually up through 5th grade. So the stuff I'm going to share with you is applicable whether you only have like 10 minutes with them, whether you have 30 minutes with them, an hour once a week. It really doesn't matter if you're a teacher or a tutor or how you're working with your struggling readers or lower readers. The principles that we're going to talk about, you can apply for sure. If you're just joining me, please share in the chat what grade you teach. Apologies if you're on the other video and you already shared this. Hey, Isabel, thanks for coming back. I think we're good now. Okay, so what I said originally is that we are going to talk. I'm actually going to use my whiteboard and document camera and kind of like talk you through the framework that I use to plan an intervention session. And again, it does not matter how much time you have. You use the principles with whatever time you do have. If you're joining me, let me know what grade you teach in the comments because I really want to make sure that I tailor this, what we're going to talk about, to the grade levels that you teach. So make sure to let me know in the comments. Thanks, Tyler, Narelle, Shika. Tell me if I'm saying your name wrong. From New Zealand, amazing. Ava, Isabel, so glad to have all of you. Okay, let's do the screen share now that I can actually do it. Okay, so you should be able to see my whiteboard. And what you're going to see in the intervention binder, and then I'm also going to show you some examples at different levels. I don't know if this text is backwards for you, but the example I'm going to show you momentarily is long vowel spelled with silent E. However, I'm also then going to screen share and show you like when you're working on letter sounds or if you're working on vowel teams. So you'll kind of see, you know, like a K2 spectrum, and often beyond 2nd grade, they're working on vowel teams. So you'll see quite a spectrum. But I want to talk you through what I'm doing in each session. And the first thing that I do in any session is some kind of work with sounds. Whoops. Okay, so when I say work with sounds, it's some kind of phonological awareness, phonemic awareness activity. And often I want it to be very much tied to the phonics pattern that we're focusing on, because at these grade levels, K2, generally what we are focusing on first is building that phonics and decoding base, because from strong phonics and decoding comes increased reading fluency, right? Which then improves comprehension. So we do work on fluency and comprehension, and I will show you how, but we're building from this phonics base. So like, let's say, for example, we are introducing long A with silent E. In this binder, these are on sale, by the way, the big bundle, 40% off through Monday, March 14th. The little skill packs like these, like for the individual phonics patterns, are also discounted, but the big bundle has a 40% off discount. Okay, so this is the student version. You would have a teacher's manual when you do this, and it tells you what to do. But in this example, we are focusing on long A spelled with silent E. And so the sounds work would be focusing on long A. So I would say to the kids, okay, today we're going to practice a way to spell the sound A. Say A, right? And so then they're going to look for, either independently or as a group, we're going to look for words that have the long A sound. So rake, bag, no, fin, no, whale, yes, right? So we circle these. So the sound work that we're doing is directly tied to what we're going to be learning about, when we start getting into the phonics, right? Because phonics is sounds and then the letters and letter patterns on the page. So we got to make sure that we're good and they can hear the sounds first. Now, when we're working on an alphabet set, which I'll show you in a little while here, I do have them work on blending, and it really doesn't have anything to do with the letters. So, you know, I'm saying sounds like up and they say up, right? And there's no pictures or anything involved. Like, that's fine too. We do some picture work with the alphabet, but sometimes it doesn't, you know, have to involve pictures. So the sounds portion is quick, right? It only takes a couple of minutes, but I always include it. Now, next up, I will either sorry, I'm not so good at writing sideways, intro or review the phonics pattern that we are studying. Now, It could be anything, right? It could be an alphabet letter. It could be, in this case, long A spelled with silent E. It could be, I don't know, like multisyllabic words spelled with ing. Whatever it is, we're going to either introduce it or review it, because we may not be doing the same thing every single day, right? Maybe on A days we introduce a new pattern, but then on B days we review it. So we're introducing or reviewing. And then from there, we go into this pattern of alternating between decoding. Whoops. So decoding, I don't have my eraser here, would just be, ignore that little line. That was from a webinar I did. Decoding would just be having the kids say the sounds ache, fake, and they're blending to read. These are sound boxes. It's a support. This open sound box reminds them that the E doesn't make a sound. So we're decoding. And then next, we're going to build some words using magnetic letters. I have some on my desk, right? So we're going to make lake, right? These are long A on here, spelled with silent E. And then we're moving to build long A words spelled with silent E. We build the whole word, decoding, encoding. Then we are decoding again, right? We're decoding some words, some real words, some nonsense words. You can't see, but at the bottom, they're writing sentences, 2 sentences with 2 of the words. And then we are encoding, meaning spelling. This time they are writing words into the sound boxes. So here's what's the great news. It does not matter if you have, like I said, 10 minutes or an hour. What I believe is effective is to begin with sound work, no matter what, to do some introduction of a new sound pattern or review, and then just to alternate between decoding and encoding. And if you use the binder that I'm showing you or anything else structured like this, you can stop whenever you get to a stopping point. If your intervention session is up, we'll just stop, right? Because the next day you can pick it up, start back with, some sounds, review, decoding, encoding, and you just alternate back and forth. Let me know if that's making sense so far. Hey, Jamie, Lorraine, Suzanne. So glad you guys are joining me. Emma. So that's basically all this is. It's pretty simple, but this framework of sounds, intro, decoding, encoding, and then we go back and forth here as long as we have time for, is how I structure it. The decoding tasks, if you remember those like sound boxes, that's an easier version. We eventually get into decoding some nonsense words. If it's appropriate for kids at that grade level, we may work on some multisyllabic words. I don't know that I have any here. Do I? Maybe I do, maybe not. So you can increase the difficulty level of the decoding by having sound boxes, then removing them, doing some nonsense words, doing multisyllabic words with that target phonics pattern. And then same thing with encoding. You remembered with the little page where we're making words with magnetic letters, there were sound boxes. Well, then the next time they're actually writing the words, which is harder. And then the next time they're spelling the words without any sound boxes, right? And the reason why sound boxes are a supportive tool is because it essentially shows them how many letters, right? This is the word lake. They know, hey, this is going to be a silent E. In this case, it's very obvious because that's the open sound box. But they are a support in spelling. And then eventually when we move on to assessment, which is here, they're just writing the word. So I do actually have multisyllabic words in here. So eventually see how that's long A spelled with silent E? They are decoding multisyllabic words with the spelling pattern. And here, the decoding is also increased in difficulty because originally we were doing words that all have long A spelled with silent E. And then eventually we're doing words that have long A spelled with silent E, but we also have some comparison words like fan or hat, words that they know how to spell already, but we're making sure that they're not confusing the short and long vowel spelling patterns by having them compare and contrast. So even though you are alternating decoding and encoding, the difficulty level of each is increasing as you go, and you're alternating and you're putting in different types of decoding and encoding activities. A sequence of skills to follow. Is it Talicia or Talisha? So with this Are you asking specifically about the binders or just in general? Because I do have a phonics scope and sequence freebie that I can grab for you for sure. I think what I want to do now that we've kind of looked at this framework, and again, this is not dependent on time, right? Like sounds pretty quick, intro review pretty quick. This is just you fill up your intervention session with this. The other thing I want to mention too, before I show you the alphabet and the vowel team stuff, you want the kids to have as much actual reading practice as possible. So like in these binders, there is a passage. The length, of course, would depend on, you know, how much the kids can read at that point, but there's a passage for each spelling pattern. And then I have them read it more than once. So like with decoding, we eventually read sentences. So we're building from words to sentences to an actual text, right? So that's how the decoding is building too. And they absolutely read this more than once. Fluency, right? A really good way to build fluency, have kids reread text. It's simple, but it's meaningful. Your fluency practice doesn't have to be fancy. Rereading is also good for their confidence because if they are struggling readers or a little bit lower, they need to have that feeling of like, yes, I can read this passage. I am good at reading this passage. So if it's hard the first time, they're not going to get that experience. What they need is to read it again and maybe again. And then we work in some comprehension. Of course, the teacher manual has lesson plans for it. And then there's some questions for the kids to answer. So we are starting with that phonics and decoding base, but we're also integrating fluency and comprehension. And even like any of the word lists, have them read it more than once for sure. Okay, Priscilla, the skills, yeah, in this particular resource, the skills correlate with the passage. So like this has lots of long A words with silent E, Kate, bake, make, made, name. Yeah, so it's really tied to that. So it's kind of, you know, it's a phonics passage, a decodable reader, whatever you want to call it, that kind of thing. Talisha, yeah, so let me give you the big bundle link right now in a comment, if I can, let me grab that. And then you can look at the sequence there. If you scroll down and look at, it says this reading intervention tool includes intervention lessons and activities for, and then it'll list everything. Just keep in mind that multisyllabic words are integrated throughout. It's not like there's like one set binder for multisyllabic words. You saw here, hopefully, how we have long A words spelled with silent E that are multisyllabic in here. Okay, so now what I want to do, again, we are still following this whole setup, but what I want to do is I want to show you some examples with alphabet letters. I see Jamie teaching kindergarten there. I know there's other teachers probably who teach kindergarten or need to work on letter sounds. So I want to make sure that we cover that. And then I'm also going to cover vowel teams, a little bit more challenging. All right, let's see. Brittany says, I have 3 kids that can read fluency, but struggling to answer the comprehension questions. The F&P comprehension questions are hard, Brittany. So a couple of questions for you. Number 1, how do they do with other comprehension assessments that you do in your classroom? And number 2, how are they with listening comprehension? If you were to read them a text from that assessment, or even just, you know, your own text and ask them questions, would they be able to answer questions like that? Just curious, because that does make a difference. Okay, so now we're going to look at the alphabet pack really quickly. Just kind of want you to see, because it is, you know, it's different from here. So with the alphabet pack, again, we're saying the sound, we're working with sounds, right? And then what I have the kids do, this is so good for getting them to hear the first sound in a word, and we start with the continuous sounds like They say milk, moon. Then what we do, and they have their own copies, we trace the letter with our finger and we say M says You even pull out some sand and have them do it there. So we're introducing the letter, we're working with sounds. And even though it's not, it's not the same as decoding words or sentences, in essence, I'm sort of switching back and forth between decoding and encoding here too, because it's like, okay, we're recognizing the letter, right? We are writing the letter, it's just supportive. So we're dabbing or circling or highlighting the letter, then we're tracing it. And you'll see just like here, the activities get harder, right? First, it's just finding the letter. Then it's tracing the letter. Then I read the words aloud to them, and they have to circle or highlight the words that begin with the letter M. This is print concepts. So with the alphabet set, the print concepts are infused, right? So we're learning, oh yeah, this is what the first letter of a word means, right? They don't read these words. It's not actually decoding. I'm reading it to them. They, read it. They're pointing one to one, good for concept of word. And then they're identifying, does it start with the letter M or no? Now we are circling back to sounds. I will say that is the one difference for like kindergarten or working with letters is I probably alternate between instead of alternating mostly between decoding and encoding, I would say I stick sounds in there. So there's more phonemic awareness, phonological awareness work in like the kindergarten set. But here they're circling pictures that begin with a sound. Some pictures don't. Here, this is more like print concepts work. I read the sentences to them and they read it back and they point. Again, it's not real decoding. We're working on pointing one to one. We're working on left to right tracking so that when they are reading, those things aren't an issue, right? They kind of know what they're doing. And they're also underlining words that begin with the letter M. So identifying the letter, we are now writing the letter. And then this little activity looks simple, but it is building them toward being able to read and write CVC words because I say, okay, our word is, or tell me what that is. That's a picture of a mug. And then if I have to do it, that's fine, but I will chop for them the sounds g. I see the that's the U. I see the g, that's the G. What sound are we missing at the beginning? What do we hear first in? Mug. And they should come up with M, write it. And then I model how to blend g, mug. So I'm modeling that blending of CVC words, even though we're not at the point where we are going to do CVC words. Okay, so then we move on to a different letter. So that's an example of the alphabet situation. Again, you're alternating a version of decoding and encoding, but with more sounds work thrown in there. Okay, so now let us look at vowel teams. The vowel teams is quite similar to the long vowels spelled with silent E. This is just the binder cover. Then first we're working on AI, very similar. We're working with sounds here. We're again they're not having to find pictures that have AI in them. The long A pictures here do have AI in them, but the focus is the sound. They are tracing for some multi-sensory. This is just all like sounds and then introduction of the spelling pattern. Excuse me. And then we are blending to read with sound boxes. So this is a visual reminder. Hey, A and I work together to make one sound. That's why they're in the sound box. And so I do want to show you this real quick. When I was showing you this page, I said I have this underlined from a webinar I did. And what I want to show you is that the first time the kids, you want them not to just shout out the word. You want them to actually read fake, either as a group or on their own. Now, some kids, once they've read the whole page, they may be ready to just start reading the words and go down. However, some kids will need a little boost between just blending and actually reading the whole word. So you might have them blend fake. Then the next time they read the page, they read fake. And the last time they read the page, they read fake. Does that make sense? You're going sound by sound to chunk by chunk to word by word. And of course, the ultimate goal is for them just to be able to say the word. Side note there, little tangent. So we're doing decoding. And then again, we're doing encoding, building words. We're doing decoding. Now it's getting a little harder, right? There's no sound boxes, but there are dots for them to blend. And it's harder because there's nonsense words. Now we're doing encoding. Writing words is generally like a higher cognitive load than just building words, because with the building, they're just grabbing letters as opposed to actually having to physically make the letters. But again, we have the sound boxes for support. Now we're back to decoding. So some of the words have AI and some of them don't. We're only showing words that have patterns the kids have learned, right? I'm not going to if we haven't learned AY yet, I'm not going to throw in AY words. These packs are really intentionally designed to not do that, right? To build in the sequence. So they've learned R controlled A, they've learned short A, but we're comparing, we're saying, hey, we know AI, but we got to make sure that we can still read these other words. So the difficulty level is increasing. We read some sentences, again, difficulty level increasing 2 times. Read the passage at least 2 times. Doesn't have to be on the same day. You can come back and have them reread it. See some good questions. I'm going to answer those in a minute. We're, writing sentences here. We are breaking apart some multisyllabic words with AI. So decoding, even more challenging, right? And then here is the assessment, is kind of where things wrap up. There's some other little games and activities that you can do, but this is typically what you'll do last. And the kids are, they're reading one-on-one to you, real words with AI, some nonsense words with AI, and then they write some words. This could come first, even depending on how you're doing it. And then based upon that information, you decide if they're ready to move on or not. Okay, such good questions. Let's see. Yes. So Brittany, I agree. The F and P questions they are challenging. So they answer all questions during interactive read aloud. I would just if it's just the F and P questions that are tripping them up, Brittany, I would look to see if you can mimic those kinds of questions in the text you're reading to them so they become comfortable with the language. Because for me, a lot of it has just been the kids understanding the language of the question and understanding how to do that thinking. Okay, Isabel says, what if they don't do sound by sound, even though they know their sounds? Isabel, is it that they're struggling to do sound by sound, or they just want to read the word? They're fake game. They're just reading like that. Let me know which it is. All right, so while I wait for Isabel, everything that you've seen here, brand new in the Learning at the Primary Pond Teachers Pay Teacher store. I mean, they're not brand new in the sense that I've been doing these with kids for a long time, right? But the finished product like this is brand new. And I designed these so that it makes it really easy for you to implement intervention. I know when I was in the classroom before becoming a reading specialist, it was so hard to find time. I needed stuff I could just print and use. You can put these in binders. You can put them in packets and staple them. You don't even have to use binders, right? Literally just print them out. There's black and white copies too if you want to do that. Staple them and you're good to go. It is hard to find time, especially in the, the classroom setting to help those kids, but this will make it easier. Okay, Isabel says he'll read some words, but most is a struggle, even if I model. Isabel, do you want to email me maybe and let me know, tell me a little bit more about this and we can chat about it just so I can have some time to think and tell you, and you can maybe tell me a little bit more about what he's doing as well. Okay, you all, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate you joining me, and I hope this was helpful. Don't hesitate to ask more questions. I can come back and answer them. Always happy to help. Good luck with your little readers. I know a lot of us have some that have gaps or, just aren't where they need to be this time of year. If you do need help or whatever, feel free to reach out. Happy to support you. Thanks so much for watching.